Please help us women finally understand men with a game I'm calling What's a Man Really Thinking? What's a man really thinking when it comes to falling in love?
I do think that there are certain areas where men are exceptionally smart, and there are areas of life where we're pretty dumb. And one of the places where we're dumb.
What's a man really thinking when it comes to jealousy and competition, crying and being vulnerable? Porn.
The people who study porn don't like that I say this, but I'm hearing from thousands of guys who.
What is a man really thinking when it comes to marriage?
I'd be willing to wager everything I have, in fact, my entire life, on this idea that
Dr. Andrew Huberman, as a neuroscientist, a professor at Stanford, and an icon to over tens of millions of men online, please help us women finally understand men and what's actually happening in his brain that makes him say and do the things that he actually does with a game I'm calling What's a Man Really Thinking?
Oh my.
So I want to know, what's a man really thinking when it comes to falling in love?
Okay, well, first, a disclaimer, right? I'm certainly not claiming to be representative of all men. Lord knows that's not
Sure.
That's not why I'm here. I do hear from a lot of men of different ages. I'll be 50 next month, so just to place myself in context. And I say that because, of course, while there are kind of universals among men, I think things are quite a bit different nowadays than they were when I was growing up, and they're likely to continue to change. So I just want to say that I acknowledge that, whatever words come out of my mouth are reflective of my experience and observations. And I don't say that to be politically correct. I say that because as a scientist, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. I represent one narrow data set in the infinite number of male data sets, as they say. So when men fall in love, at least by way of my experience, I think they experience what everyone else experiences, which is a complete and total change in their perceptual landscape, which is nerd speak for things sound different, they look different, our attention to subtle cues or not so subtle cues is much sharper. All of this in men, which is the only experience I know, but we know from research is also true in women, is reflective of massive changes in what we call these neuromodulators. Yes, dopamine increases. Dopamine, not the molecule of pleasure, but rather the molecule of motivation, right? I mean, I think anyone that's had the great gift of falling in love has experienced the incredible surge in energy and excitement, what neuroscientists call arousal, that occurs when we are falling in love. And with that increase in arousal, we notice so much more. And certain things become very salient to us. We're like, love the way that she responded to this, or love the way that she laughs, or love, these little things. And I think that is characteristic of the early stages of falling in love. So the notion of a love bubble, as it was described to me recently, is absolutely real. So I don't think that there are vast differences between men and women in terms of how they fall in love. Of course, there are going to be certain things related to how guarded or open one is. I've been in modes of my life where I've been very guarded against falling in love, and other times when I've been more open to it, right? There's the vacation phenomenon. Whenever people are on vacation, away from your general obligations of the day, when you're not in task duty oriented, kind of checking off the list type mental frame, you're more relaxed. When you're more relaxed, you're more open to things. When you're more open to things, you're more prone to noticing things and so on and so forth. So I think it's exactly identical for everybody. I say that having only been male, but when I hear from a friend or when I look to my own experience of when I'm excited about somebody that I'm falling in love with, it's been curiosity is one of the most common themes, like a real desire to understand, like, who is this person, what are they about, an interest in their past for, I think, good reasons. You want to know somebody's context. I want to be fair to my half of the human species. I do think that there are certain areas where men are exceptionally smart, and there are areas of life where we're pretty dumb. And one of the places where we're dumb is, I think, this gene that confers maleness, what we call the SRY gene, literally a gene on the Y chromosome that defines, it's deterministic for creating a male versus a female. It codes for a bunch of genes that do incredible things, but at least among those things is a desire to just kind of like pick up objects and see what happens if you smash two of them together.
This is specifically the male chromosome.
Yeah, I really do. So, you know, there's a very interesting thing about humans generally, but here we're talking about males. So having this kind of desire across our evolution to create action at a distance, right? Like, here's a rock. Am I gonna like pay attention to the contours of a rock? That's kind of what a scientist does. Another thing that, you know, everyday scientist does, picks up a rock and kind of like, oh yeah, that's hard. It hits against my head. Oh, I'm gonna throw it against that wall. Does it break? I mean, having grown up in a big pack of boys, this is what happens. You see things in your environment and you experiment with them.
Why is that specifically to guys then, do you think?
Well, I think women do it too. I think that but it's ubiquitous among males in my experience. I think, now here we're talking about stereotypes in general.
Of course, yes, let's make sure that
like there are gonna be exceptions, you know, but I think that having been a young male at one point, one of the things that you very quickly start to do is you are generally less interested in kind of like psychological interactions between things, as opposed to like banding up as a group and saying like, what would happen if? Like, what would happen if? So there's a lot of kind of experimentation with what would happen if. Sometimes that gets men killed. Oh. Sometimes that gets men to be popular among their peer group. And so here we're deviating from love, but I think the what would happen if concept and actions is just, to me, at least in my experience, is so central to the male experience. And it's part of the reason I became a scientist. Now I trained, again, I don't say this to be politically correct, I trained under a woman for my PhD who really enjoyed this what would happen if, let's like just try things in an intelligent way. So it's certainly not unique to men, but I think scientists like to play what would happen if in a very controlled way where you make guesses about what might happen and then you see if those guesses are correct or incorrect.
In thinking about that actually, because it seems like, as you were talking, I was like, why wouldn't women do that? Do you think it's because there's so much more consequences to a woman? So what would happen if I go and just sleep with a random guy? Well, you can get pregnant and now your whole life has changed. Like, it seems like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, women, we do like the stability because we like to think about the nurturing, the family, the upbringing. Obviously, again, I'm being stereotypical too. So it seems like as a guy, you don't have that. Do you think that that's why women aren't so inclined to do that? And then I'm trying to think about how now we put that into a relationship form. Why women, maybe I'm wrong, I actually don't have a stat, but why women seek comfort and commitment more than guys do? Well,
again, not for any politically correct reasons, but were it not for women, I mean, most guys would probably end up dead. Oh. Because they'll do what would happen if until they obliterate themselves. Right now, I think men also have a self-preservation mechanism inside, but I think a lot of the what would happen if is a testing of self. Now, I don't know if this is sociological or if it's biological. It's almost certainly a mix of nature and nurture, like almost everything, right? We should acknowledge that. But I do think that as a young male, there's a lot of self-testing. You know, you run a race against people. Like, am I the slowest? Am I the fastest? Am I somewhere in between? I have a sister. So, you know, in the room next door to me growing up, they would play their games and she got involved in theater and they would have roles and all these things. She played some sports, but she was more oriented towards the arts. You know, I was more oriented towards sports. And so there is this very real hierarchical thing among males. Who's gonna be the leader? Who's gonna be the follower? But this is where I think people miss the key thing. It's very dynamic. In one situation, this guy's the leader, the so-called alpha. In another situation, it's another. And so in different contexts, we realized, every young male realizes.
All right, guys, we'll be right back with Andrew Huberman. But for 1 second, if you want to build your confidence, if you want to build your self-worth, set boundaries and stand up for yourself once and for all, then smash the subscribe button down there so that you can get notified every single time an episode comes out. Ladies, you are not alone and we're here to build our confidence together. So smash that subscribe button. Now, back to the episode.
And so in different contexts, we realized, every young male realizes, better at certain things, not at others. These days, unfortunately, what I see is that there's a lot of early push to figure out what somebody is going to be absolutely exceptional in, or what we as individuals are going to be exceptional in. And as a consequence, I think there's less trying of things that we aren't superb at. Okay, like I'm a musical failure. I love music, but I can't play a musical instrument whatsoever. So I was, reasonably good at certain things and less good at others. And I wouldn't say superb at any of them, but there were things where I felt like, oh, maybe I could become really excellent at something. I think that when I was growing up, there was more of a tendency to expose oneself to all the things. And so there was also the experience that I think is very critical for men to not be the best at something, to actually be pretty darn lousy at certain things that would be considered quite male things. Because I think with that becomes kind of a relaxation with self, that you don't always have to be tops at everything. And I think what I'm hearing a lot, because I do hear a lot from men in the kind of, I would say probably in the 18 to 40 bracket mostly, and upwards of that as well, is that there's this immense pressure to find what they're superb at and really make that their entire identity. And that just wasn't the case when I was growing up. But the reason I say that I think women, thank goodness for women, because I think a lot of guys would end up dead, is first of all, their brains do develop faster. We know this. In a group of young boys and girls, the boys are fidgeting much more than the girls. That's because their forebrain, which essentially controls what I call the shh response on the rest of your circuitry, it's the thing that shuts down impulses, it just hasn't developed as well. And one thing that I just learned recently is that myelination, the sheathing of neurons with this fatty tissue that we call myelin, it's a healthy fat that allows neurons to communicate very quickly, is not completed until approximately age 50.
Oh my God.
50.
What?
50. And yet it's completed much earlier in females than it is in males on average. These are always just averages. So even like a so-called adult men, 35, 40-year-old men, 45-year-old men, they're not even completely myelinated yet. Women aren't completely myelinated.
What does that exactly mean for people that may not know? Like, what does that mean from how someone shows up and behaves?
Yeah, it translates into their brain is not functioning nearly as quickly as other brains in the room, as fast. So they might be saying things very quickly, they might be doing things very quickly, but it's not being filtered through the same set of nuance as is, the brains that are more myelinated. So I think, I'm not trying to kind of pepper in factoids as a way to dodge the question. I think this what would happen if thing, let's take the extremes. The space program. Okay, so Elon wants to go to Mars, but the space program's been around for a long time. What would happen if, in the space program, we've now had female astronauts, but at its inception was like, what would happen if we could literally launch rockets into space and then launch monkeys into space, and then we could go to space and walk around on the moon? This is like what would happen if type thinking. Again, not unique to males, but it's very clear this is part of our evolution. But I'd be willing to wager everything I have, in fact, my entire life, on this idea that the SRY gene that resides on the Y chromosome drives a set of brain structures, which we know about, and hormone changes that include testosterone, but other things too. Its relationship to dopamine and motivation, that often leads the male brain to think, what would happen if? And I think in the context of relationship, I do think that understanding this aspect of the male brain and keeping it within the guardrails that are healthy. As a male, I can say it's wonderful when this aspect of us is seen and appreciated, provided it's benevolent. Because I think it's a wonderful feature of humanness.
Wow, so now actually take that one step further to echo into a relationship. So what does that actually look like? So maybe I can give you an example from my husband and you let me know if it's accurate. So Tom, he works a lot more than I do. And he metaphorically says, it's like I go to war every day, I get kicked in the teeth and I come back with blood on my face. And he's like, as my wife, I want you to greet me like I've been to war. Is that what you mean? Where it's like we recognize that you've gone out and done the hard thing, the challenge, the competition.
Well, first of all, I love your guys' relationship.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't think folks really can understand just how positively you guys hold each other in, and the way you talk about one another in front of one another, sure, on camera, but off camera too. And it's just awesome. Yeah, I think that's exactly what he's talking about. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I won't get this exactly right, but Tom told me a story once where he was working so much that he was literally like on the floor trying to get up onto the couch. And in my mind, to stay with this kind of general theme I've been raising, I think that was Tom. And like, what would happen if I worked to absolute exhaustion? What would happen? Would I die? Would I succeed? Would I 10x what I've got? Would I be 10 times the provider? I think that kind of experimentation, which in that case would have been unhealthy to continue. I'm glad you pulled him out.
Yes, I did.
I think you were the one that pulled him out of that mode.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I think that seeing where it comes from, which is really, yes, a desire to be a provider and protector, as well as really testing one's limits, right? We were just talking about like young boys testing their limits, hopefully not to their own demise, right? But really trying to figure out, what am I capable of? And I do think that in its best form, the masculine-feminine dance is one in which men don't immolate themselves with work or with working out or with the pursuit of money or the pursuit of anything, including experimentation. And I think that's a wonderful, that's a wonderful feature of a great relationship. I think he was saying, I'm trying to figure out how much is too much. And if I know Tom well enough to know that he was trying to figure out, can I raise the upper ceiling on my ceiling? And can you applaud me for doing that?
Yeah, and as his wife, what's hard in this complexity is the one thing I swore when I said I do when I was getting married was, I'll never change you. I know exactly who you are. I know how ambitious you are. And just because I have a ring on my finger doesn't mean that's going to change. And so in our entire lives, when Tom's like, hey, I want to start this new protein bar company. Let's put our house up for collateral. Like all of this, I was like, I know who you are. I can get another house. I can't get another Tom. And it was very clear for me that I would never hold him back on his ambition. But understanding that part of what a man is like, again, not to be generalized, but it was so important for me to understand that, because if I didn't know, I would have been the wife that's like, I can't believe you want to gamble our house away. Like when we got married, you told me you were going to protect me and you want to gamble our house. Like I could have definitely pulled those triggers that would have made him feel bad for who he is. And so that's why I was so excited to talk to you about understanding the structure, the fundamentalness of how a guy functions. So that breaking down of that was really beautiful. I want to take it a little step further when you said about the competition piece, if that's okay. So when I first met Tom, he came to London, we went out and we were playing pool. And I think I'm pretty good at playing pool. So we're playing, and right at the end, it's like make or break. He either gets the black in the hole and he wins, or he misses it and I win. So I've seen all the movies, Andrew, so I go up to him and I'm going to be really sexual. I'm going to whisper in his ear. And I think it's the most sexy thing ever. He got so upset with me because he missed the shot. And it was early days, so I didn't understand men. I didn't understand ego. I didn't understand any of that. And I was like, why are you upset that you've just missed the shot? And he's like, I want you to see me as being the best at everything. That was exactly his phrase. And I said, now imagine if I was with you for the rest of my life, how would that make me feel that you want to be best at everything? Help me think, is that the male ego? Is that the male brain? Is that society?
I have a lot of thoughts.
Okay, please tell me.
Who won the game?
I think I won the game.
Okay.
Yeah, because he missed the shot, so I must have won the game.
I'm not going to play pool against you.
It's dangerous around the Bilyeus.
Yeah, seriously. Well, first of all, is it the ego? Is it the brain? Yes. I will say competitiveness, I think, is on a bit of a continuum among men, having known a lot of different men. Sometimes it can be very, what we call domain specific. Like I don't consider myself generally competitive. Like I'll lose a game of ping pong and not think about it.
Right.
There were guys like Michael Jordan who talked about how he had to win at everything. I mean, if you were betting $1 over something, he figured out how to win. I do think, in a perhaps, hopefully healthy way, just as presumably women want to be the number one in their person's life, right? Sure, they can come to the acceptance that other women are attractive to a man, and men can come to the acceptance that other men are attractive to their partner. Everyone, I think, likes the feeling that they are like the pick, that they're the choice. This notion of like being picked is a really big deal to everybody. Men and women vocalize it differently, but being picked just feels really good. And being passed over or picked, but with an asterisk there, nobody likes that. Men might be a little better at hiding it, but nobody likes that. And I think this harkens back to our early wiring. I mean, think about how weird this is. I think nowadays we all understand these attachment patterns and this whole thing, and the idea that they're laid down during development. But just think about how wild it is that the same brain circuitry that...
Coming up.
I think it's hard. I think it's difficult. And like real world sexual interactions require that. I think it's a real trap for a lot of men.
Let's talk about something that I actually was really struggling with, and that's waking up exhausted, even after I had a decent night's sleep. And let's be honest, being grumpy is not the best way to start your day. You're dragging your feet, your brain is foggy, you're snapping at people that you love. Well, then the great news is that it's not actually a new normal. That's just your body screaming that it wants support. And that's where Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers comes in. It's the only supplement with 7 different types of magnesium, each one targeting a different system in your body. Sleep, stress, digestion, muscles, focus, boom, Bioptimizer has you covered. Plus, it's formulated for actual absorption. It's all natural, no synthetics, it's vegan, gluten-free, soy-free, and lactose-free. It has a 365-day money-back guarantee. Head to bioptimizers.com/impact and use code IMPACT now for 15% off.
But just think about how wild it is that the same brain circuitry that is responsible for infant us and caregiver attachment during development is repurposed for romantic attachment. Just think about how wild that is. I mean, it's very Freudian and all that, but all the brain imaging data, all the psychological data point to exactly that, for better or worse. And when we're young, if we're not picked by our parent, our primary caregiver, it could mean certain death. So much so that have you ever seen you have siblings, right?
I do, yeah.
Have you ever seen the pictures of an older sibling with a newborn baby and the face on the older sibling where the parents are like, we've got this cute little baby and then we've got the older child. Usually the older child is looking like they want to commit siblicide, which is like, there's even this phenomenon in animals where animals, someone who's raised on a farm, correct me if I'm wrong, but this notion of free martins, that within utero, the animals are secreting things to damage the hormones of the neighboring fetus so that they will be sterile and or smaller to get fewer resources. Or do you remember going to dinner, out to dinner with your family? We didn't go out to dinner too much when we were kids, but my sister used to point out if she had this much more soda than this much, like this much. I'm like, what? You look back. So it's like getting more resources, being the one that's picked, being the one that feels special is so important. Male, female, I don't care what any guy says.
Out of curiosity, as we were talking, is it more prevalent in younger guys? Because the story I just told you was Tom when he's 24.
So one thing that I know from my own experience, but that I hear all the time from guys, younger and older, is this notion of what I'll call the satellite male, but it's really from a very early stage of dating or getting to know a woman that we're romantically interested in. We're trying to understand what her concept of maleness is. This is something that is ubiquitous in male perspective on relationship. We're trying to figure out what's her dad like, right? Like I was dating someone and she's like, yeah, my dad and I, rode motorcycles together. And I was like, you have guns in your family? She's like, oh yeah, my family's got a lot of guns. So you're getting a picture, right? It's probably an incomplete picture, almost certainly incomplete.
You're right.
I'm like, is he good at fixing stuff? Oh yeah, he can fix anything. Okay, so what you're trying to understand is this her notion of maleness? Now, you don't know, maybe she wants to be with a guy who's like an intellectual who's good at, matrix math or something like that. But at that time, you're just trying to get a sense of what her notion of maleness is, the ideal male is. Women, to be honest, have sometimes learned to leverage this notion of a satellite male or their concept, by pointing out somebody who's attractive or an actor they like or a previous boyfriend that was awesome or could do something really well. This is the kind of stuff that worms into guys' heads. And that I will say, and I can say this thankfully with gratitude now, those satellite pictures were and are a big part of a man's maturation. I'll tell you, I had a previous girlfriend, she's gonna chuckle when she hears this, who the guy she was dating prior to me, okay, he was a Navy SEAL. He had a television show. People know who this is if I continue. He looks like the Marlboro Man. Okay. He literally looks like the Marlboro Man. He had the kind of dog I wanted. He had the truck I wanted. This dude was like, and he's super nice. We later actually became friends or friendly, but he's a legitimate real world badass. And get this, he's an intellectual. He can recite poetry and all this stuff. So in my mid 30s, I was like, goodness gracious, like this is a lot. These are big shoes to fill, you know, and I was not at a place in my life where I could like talk to her about that or anything. However, and I thanked him later, those attributes, right, caused me to take a look at myself, where I was strong, where I was weaker. And fortunately, I knew to lean into my strengths, you know, which I'm an academic intellectual. Sure, I have a physicality, but I'm not about to go do what he was doing for a profession or any of that. And it really forces you to ask yourself, what am I about and what am I really about? Am I gonna spend my entire life trying to have more money than everybody else so that I can't be outcompeted? Am I gonna try and be the most physically fit? You know, the joke nowadays is that all these guys who are like lifting weights to get like super jacked, that women are not interested in excessive muscle. You know, there's this whole debate online. They'll be like dad bod versus like bodybuilder. And of course, presumably it's on average, it's somewhere in the middle. But, you know, a lot of guys are interested in getting more and more money, more and more muscle, more and more women, more and more, whatever you want to call it. As a competition, that competition is all with themselves. So it's this kind of thing where I think guys are always trying to figure out, you know, where they fit into the hierarchy. And again, some men are super competitive their whole lives. They just like live to compete, but I don't think that's most men.
So let's actually go to, if you don't mind, the Navy SEAL guy, because going back to jealousy, when I think about, you know, because actually you wrote that down. So what's a man really thinking when it comes to jealousy and competition and things like that? And so in that moment where your girlfriend's saying this, trigger, I assume from you.
Well, it wasn't the Navy SEAL thing. It was his damn recollection of poetry and medieval history. I was like, because at that moment, I was like, is there anything this dude doesn't do?
Yeah.
Funny. He's gonna laugh about this. And she and I talked about it, and she just laughed so hard. You know what she told me? This is interesting. She said, that's so crazy, because in those same phases of our relationship, I was completely obsessed by one photo of you and your high school girlfriend where she looked a certain way getting out of some lake that you guys were on vacation about, and she was also a great artist. And and she was feeling a ton of pressure around this. And, you know, yes, my high school girlfriend was awesome in every regard, but I would have, at that moment, had I known, I would have just been like, yeah, but I was mostly like excited about how awesome you were. Yeah. And so there's all this unspoken stuff. And I think while not everything needs to be spoken about in a relationship, I do think that there's a lot of kind of just fluff and bullshit that we get caught up in early in relationship that takes us away from actually getting to know the person. And I think it's because early on, you're trying to figure things out like through a telescope, right? You're interacting up close, but you're trying to read signals. And I think maybe it's different nowadays where people just sit down and they're like, what do you really value? And what do you really value? But that's just not how it was when I was growing up. You were paying attention, like you hear later, you know, oh, it's so nice that you hold the door. Or, you know, I'm close with my sister. People would say like, I love the way that it was how you treated your sister. And so like, we're just not getting the full picture, and women aren't getting the full picture about men, which is I guess why you have this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so then what's the difference then in the way you handled it? So you were like, okay, it stung, but I really looked at, okay, well, where am I best at and what am I good at? It can actually be a great motivation. The problem is sometimes I think it can be a destruction, and that's where the guy goes into the toxic jealousy, where it's now obsessive and bringing the woman down instead of making themselves better. What difference is there between the man that is saying, okay, great, let me look at my life and get better, versus the man that just wants to try and put other people down to make themselves feel better?
Well, here I was fortunate that my dad, pretty early on, encouraged me to find what I was good at and loved. You know, my dad, he's a scientist also, he's a theoretical physicist, but he has this kind of like artistic, romantic notion of life. Maybe it's because he's Argentine, maybe it's something else. And he said very young, he said, you know, you want to find the thing that like gives you this texture of excitement. He said, you know, that had the feeling the night before your birthday? I remember this from a conversation when I was six. And I said, yeah. And he said, that's how it feels when I go to work. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so I kind of, early on, I was kind of like looking for that thing that felt like, this is really cool. And I learned early on to not really care if other people thought it was cool. I really lucked out. But what he taught me was to orient toward a feeling. And so I think that, what it comes down to is being able to recognize that none of us are going to be 10 out of 10 on every dimension. And I do believe, and I've certainly experienced this in my relationships, that we are celebrated in our relationships by our partners for the things that really feel most true to us, right? So I think it is important, and with certainty, I can say this with certainty, it's important that a man find what he really loves doing and can get really good at. Maybe not the best at, but really good at. But it's also really important that I think one of the bigger steps in becoming a man is saying, I'm not going to be a professional athlete. Might have had fantasies of that when I was a kid, but that's not my thing. I'm this other thing, and I love that. Or I'm going to be an artist, or I'm going to be a musician, and being okay with that. I do think everyone should take good care of their physical body and their well-being, but I think it's one of the final steps in becoming a complete male is really acknowledging that you're not going to win every competition. And I like to think that women, my experience is that women can really see that. And I will also tell you that if a guy is driven, he's going to work until someone says, typically his partner says, hey, like, you're killing yourself with work. And Tom is going to hate me for saying this. Deep down, they're waiting for that. Because they're basically like, you're not just enough, you're more than enough. That's a great message to get. It's also fun to see just what you're capable of. I mean, I didn't work 120 hours a week, but as a graduate student, I probably pushed 80, 85 hours a week. I used to collapse on the floor of the lab, get up and keep doing it. Yeah. I remember another guy saying, you're going to burn out. And I was like, your flame never got lit. Like the kind of BS that guys get into. He's a great guy. And, but I think in our 20s, we carry that flame burns so hot, and it's really important that it find a healthy direction. Now, as we're saying this, of course, there's this entire other dimension nowadays where the deaths of despair in men are at an all-time high. Guys are killing themselves, they're drinking themselves to death, porn, all of this. And I think that comes from a sense of overwhelm. I think it comes from feeling like, my God, like life is overwhelming. I'm supposed to be all these things, become all these things. I can barely get my act together to get from first class of the day to the end of the day. We're getting our butts kicked in every dimension of life. And once a guy hits a state of overwhelm, he's going to default to the things that give him quote unquote pleasure, because it's not sustainable pleasure, but pleasure with the least amount of effort. And that's where you really start seeing the spiraling down.
That's what my next one was actually going to be, is what is a man really thinking when it comes to porn? So I understand the stress. Makes complete sense. Like when you're going out and you're so stressed, it's like sometimes you want an outlet, you want it quick, you don't want the whole fuss, so totally get porn. Like I'm a fan of porn until it gets maybe a bit too far. Now,
too far in terms of frequency or form?
I was thinking probably frequency, but that's actually interesting. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that pornography was and probably always will be a part of a male's sexual education. The question is, how much of a role? Is it going to be your only teacher about sexual interactions? I think that we all agree that that's not good. If porn becomes the only outlet, that's not good. And I think we should just be direct here. Like, if we're talking about pornography, we're probably also talking about masturbation, right?
Yes,
we're probably not talking about people just watching.
Thank you,
that.
yes.
Right. So then it becomes, and I can only speak to what I hear from young guys. There are a lot of young guys who are addicted to porn. The people who study porn don't like that I say this. They don't like this, but I'm hearing from thousands of guys who can't stop watching porn and want to stop watching porn. And they are also, they tell me, and I would be open about it if I had an issue with this. I feel very fortunate that I never developed like a really strong proclivity to porn, but then I grew up before internet.
That's what I was gonna say, yeah.
And then I just didn't, and I would say if I did, but I hear them and I have a sensitivity to what they're saying, which is that it is so accessible. And like anything that taps into the dopamine system, which porn does, like gambling does, like drugs of abuse do, et cetera, all of those are initially hinge on dopamine. They are using more and more kind of intense forms of stimulation in order to get to the same level, which is gradually dropping. That baseline of dopamine drops as they indulge in their behavior. Could be gambling, could be porn, but here we're just talking about porn more and more often. So less pleasure, more drive to continue. That's hell. Less pleasure, more drive to continue. And it's taking them out of, presumably, the motivation to go out and date, meet people, develop healthy sexual interactions, which itself is a whole set of skills. That's also culturally very dynamic, right? Where there's the app thing now, right? It's no longer like asking for somebody's number. I suppose it could be or should be, but it's typically, are they getting picked on dating apps? Are they picking people on dating apps? Are they actually going through that effort? And now with AI, there is this idea that guys are just going to be able to create their ultimate fantasy person. I am less concerned about that than perhaps I should be. I don't know. I just don't. I think the drive to find partnership hopefully will supersede the drive for just like raw pleasure in the moment. That would be my hope.
When you said that porn can become an outlet for stress, totally understand that. Can it be any type of stress? Because there's the person the guy that's going and working and he's got kids and he's got a wife and he's got bills to pay and it's like, oh my God, I just want 5 minutes. I'm going to quickly go in the bathroom and watch some porn. Okay, got it. What about the stress though, where it's the stress emotional, where you've got the 25-year-old or 30-year-old man that's living in his mother's basement watching porn all day? Like, help me think through those two different dynamics.
I think what probably initially drives men to porn is a curiosity. And then I do think that eventually the research will point to the fact that some people are much more prone to pornography addiction than others. Really? The same way we know that some people are more prone to what's now called alcohol use disorder, what we used to call alcoholism, or to cannabis addiction versus recreational cannabis use versus what I do think that we have a different constellations of genes and phenotypes and some people really like up states. They're more likely to take and abuse amphetamines. Others more down states. They're gonna be more likely to take things like ketamine or get addicted to these things, right? A lot of these things also have therapeutic applications. I think pornography, the way it's in the world now, is basically got its tentacles out there, finding the people that they're socially maybe a little bit anxious, curious. We're curious. I mean, my guess is women watch porn too, right? Yeah, they're curious too. What are people doing? What do people do? This kind of thing. I think that males in general are not exceptional at relational communication. Some are, but I think it's hard. I think it's difficult, and like real world sexual interactions require that. I think it's a real trap for a lot of men. So the guy in his mom's basement who's 25 and is watching porn all the time, that picture is pretty bleak, as you would imagine. But what's even bleaker is what's not happening. I think we're so focused on what is happening, but what's not happening. Let's just set aside sex for a minute. He's not going on a coffee date. Is any woman gonna even know he exists? Probably not. Is he even gonna understand what he likes in a real world interaction? Again, when we remove sex from the equation, it starts feeling a bit more psychological and I think more tractable. So can he decide, actually I went on a coffee with this woman and I'm not really interested. I don't know why. Like, yeah, she's attractive, I'm just not interested. I don't know why. But this other woman, she's really funny and like, I don't know, my friends don't think that she's as hot as the other woman, but like, I really like her. She's cool. Like we would be friends and I think I'm attracted to her. This is how it used to go. With porn, you can dial in the knob, bad figure of speech, of exactly what you want and get exactly that, which is not how life works. It's just not how life works. It's, and I think that we have to be very, very concerned about this. Now, we can't just say it should be inaccessible, although I think to kids it should be inaccessible, because there's some pretty like crazy, violent stuff. There's certain things that no one should see, especially kids, right? And I think that, because that can change one's like mind. Just like when I was a kid, we were able to see some like horror movies, but these weren't horror movies with like outrageous violence. They were just kind of like silly horror movies. Right. With time, like I still can't see the Dahmer thing. I won't watch it.
I watch every serial killer TV show, docuseries,
that's a whole thing into itself. Women love that.
Oh, dude.
Why do you think that is?
Okay, okay.
Can we take that
Dude,
tangent?
let's absolutely take this tangent. Okay, so I grew up obsessed. I read all the Ted Bundy books. I read The Green River Killer. Like, I was 14 reading these books, fascinated.
And scared?
Not really.
Okay.
It was like, so I read the Fred and Rose West. Do you know who they were? Okay, so couple in England, and they would pick up hitchhikers, and they had a little Volkswagen Bug, and they were an old couple. And Rose, she would be in the passenger seat and be like, "Oh, love, come on, get in the
She was the decoy.
She was the decoy. Yeah. She was the one then handcuffing them and whipping them and doing just crazy stuff while the husband was peeping through a hole, watching and masturbating. It was a crazy story.
This is a real life thing.
Real life story. So growing up, I hear all this crazy stuff. As I got older, I was like, why am I so fascinated? Over time, I realized, I think it's become a protective mechanism. So think about in evolution, the man goes out and he hunts. The women are in their little village. It's just women. You better know when something's off. You better know when there's a predator. Because if you can't sense when there's a predator, they could come kill your children and now everyone's dead. So my hypothesis is, as a woman, your natural inclination is to understand the micro expressions, the body language of a predator, so you can spot it in order to protect your village while the men out are hunting. What do you think?
It's a great hypothesis. I mean, I never would have come up with that one, just to show more of the divergence of the, XX versus XY chromosomes. I mean, it's always intrigued and, confused me as to why this would be so interesting to women and perhaps less so to men. I had a different hypothesis.
Oh,
Again,
yours?
not grounded in any research, just experience, which is, I didn't grow up in the inner city or anything, but I got in a few scraps when I was younger, and I've seen some like pretty bad beatdowns and worse just by virtue of being out in the world over time. And like every time I see that or hear it, like violence kind of makes me, there's kind of a sickening feeling that the sounds associated with it and the aftermath and what's associated with it. And so I just, I think boys hopefully aren't beating each other up or worse, but I think a lot of men just don't need to see it because they've seen it.
I think of that as maybe that's a lot of crime and violence, but as a woman, and maybe let's put this together then, as a woman, you really fear it. You fear being manipulated. And maybe it's like if you end up being fooled by a psychopath and he impregnates you, now your entire life is connected to that psychopath.
So that's the ultimate fear.
I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming yes.
Yeah.
Because when you think of, I don't necessarily want a child that's a psychopath. I don't know genetically how much those are linked. But in all seriousness, it's like once you have sex with a guy, if you end up getting pregnant by a very bad actor, that changes your whole life. And so just thinking about the protective mechanisms. So when I think about fear between men and women, in fact, let me ask you, when was the last time you went out in the evening?
Last night.
All right. Right before you left, what did you do? What's like your thought process of leaving the house?
I got my keys, got my glasses, put my shoes on, walked out the door.
Okay, right? Just like the practical. I need my keys, I need shoes, I'm out the door.
Yeah.
As a woman, it's how am I getting a ride? How am I getting back? Is my phone fully charged? Do I have my keys on me when I'm walking in a parking lot? Is it dark? Like there's all this thing that comes with just making a decision to go out at night that men don't think about because as a woman, there's so much consequence. So now I think about a guy. I heard you say in an interview recently where you said women fear the most a man being violent to them. A man fears the most a woman laughing at him. So when you even think about what we fear the most, as a woman, it absolutely is your body, your protection, your safety. So talk to me about why laughing at a man is the thing that they fear the most.
Yeah, so that was born out of a conversation that I had with a young guy in his 30s who came up to me, and we were chatting, and he was talking about his dating. I was like, because I knew him when he was in a previous relationship. How's it going? He's like, man, it's the worst. And I was like, why? I mean, he's a really good looking guy. He's successful and kind. And I would think that he would be like a great partner, like highly eligible. I don't know. Yeah. And he said, well, he's not comfortable being on apps because he feels like if he goes out on a date and he doesn't do everything perfectly, that it's going to be in the message boards, or like, I know they're not called message boards anymore. I'm not that old. But that it's going to land in some area where then he's being shamed. So it's not so much being, I should have used better language, not being laughed at, but that he's being shamed for something related to his ability to be a good partner. Could be sexual, could be chivalry, could be, a bunch of things. So what he was expressing is that his like level of anxiety around being perfect. Remember, we're getting back to this thing like the need to be perfect, right? The need to not make a single mistake. He was really reporting the pressure of that and how he just decided to opt out of online dating at all. So
because of that feeling of shame if he can't be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And that if something didn't go well, that it would be his fault. Like, right, because remember, the game used to be the reverse. Sorry, everybody, but it used to be the reverse where guys talk, although they don't really talk that much about, I think women think that men talk a lot about their sexual exploits, a lot more than they actually do.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I grew up different, but like after a certain point, I just assumed my friends were either doing or not doing whatever they were doing.
So you guys don't really discuss sex?
Not so much. I mean, when we were younger, among my friends, since I was in the early cohort of guys to get a girlfriend, we had like a brief like male talk about, which was to not talk about it, but kind of like just like, but yeah, there's not a whole lot of discussion about it.
So is that just stereotypical message that we got? Because women, at least I'm going to speak about, we talk a lot about sex and details.
Yeah. And I think men know that, and I think that contributes to part of the reason they feel, at least early on, before they've had some experience, And so I think that what's really cool is, I know this because I've been involved in kind of mentoring some folks. This notion that when these are heterosexual couples I'm referring to, but the theme applies, I believe, across the board, where like a guy and a girl are starting to date, that they're going to vault the relationship. Like they're making a commitment to like try and work things out with each other, right? Now, whether or not they do that or not, I don't know. But that the idea is that there's some room to make mistakes. There's some room to create what's called intimacy, right? Remember that other version of intimacy where you really felt safe not being perfect. And now we're not talking about like, oh, does he cry or not cry? Like I think nowadays you get points for crying. Actually, I saw this thing the other day of this like hockey player. He's away from home. There's a real life thing. And he broke down crying during a press interview. And he's a badass hockey player. And everyone, the comments were like, awesome. This dude's a badass. Now, he's also a badass hockey player, but the tears were not seen as a point of weakness. They were seen as a point of like strength and being able to show vulnerability. So things have really changed.
But can I pause there, actually? It's only changed in a certain amount because you said he's a badass. I hate to say it, if he wasn't a badass and he was working a regular job and he was earning $50,000 a year and he cries, I hate to say it, but I bet you the women around him won't think the same as that badass hockey player that's getting paid millions of dollars and cries on camera.
Totally. I mean, and we have these archetypes, you got your Jocko Willink. I mean, the dude looks like General Pat. Jocko's a buddy of mine. He looks like that.
His neck is thicker than his head.
And he legitimately wakes up at 4:30 every morning and he like works out. He rolls jujitsu. He's a great dad. He serves. I mean, it's sort of like, is there anything he doesn't do?
It's us all to shame.
Yeah. So I mean, and Jocko's a great guy, and so those standards. I think it's wonderful that I sort of see Jocko as like he's an archetype, that a lot of young guys needed to see to push themselves harder when they wanted to like sleep in or not take care of their physical bodies, not take full responsibility. They're really, his whole thing is extreme ownership in everything, which is a beautiful principle. Okay. So we need those people, right? What I'm hearing is that it's hard to get to know people. And we're not talking about being vulnerable on a first date, but we're talking about it's hard for people to get to know us in a way that feels like really safe, right? Whereas in the past, you kind of felt like if you went on a date and wasn't that great, like I've been on some dates in the past where I was like, goodness gracious, she's annoying. I was just white knuckling to the end of that one. Like I was dying for someone to pull a fire alarm. But I think the assumption was always that was a closed environment. And so I think that nowadays with I think a lot of young guys are fearing being shamed by women. And so it's sending them into more and more isolation. So I say this because I think that the more that women and men feel safe, to be themselves, like, and we're talking about within the margins of like healthy selves, right? Not harming anyone, not harming themselves. I think that the quicker people are going to get to this thing that they're after, which is like real partnership, the quicker that they're going to get to that thing, which is like real intimacy. And I think oftentimes the whole discussion around sexual interactions, that's really just a microcosm and reflection of the larger theme of like, are men and women even comfortable around one another nowadays? And I think we are in a tricky time now where there seems to be a lot of kind of like circling each other, like sizing. Recently the New York Times ran this big article about, you know, what men and boys need, like the suffering of men and boys. This was a first in a while for a magazine like the Times. And it wasn't like what's wrong with them, it was more what do they need? Different tone. We're starting to hear that now. You got people like Scott Galloway and I think Richard Reeves wrote a book on boys and men. Like that's a little bit more like left leaning. You're also starting to see a blurring of the polarization between the kind of like red pill, there are still those extremes, but and the kind of woke. You're starting to see this kind of middle ground fill in where it's like, you've got some influencers who are certainly more left-leaning who are showing that yeah, they also like lift weights and go to the gym. That's not just like a red pill phenomenon.
Right.
Things got a little crazy for a while, right? Got a little crazy where it's like the stereotypes were so extreme. It was like two hills of like these men and those men. And it was really unfortunate. And so I think now we're having this conversation at exactly the right time, because my hope would be that men and women would take a look at men and themselves and would say, hey, like, I do believe everyone is in this life to have something, may not be career, but sometimes it is, that they really feel is like them. It's like that what my dad was describing, that texture of like, I can't wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
And women are feeling a ton of pressure. I know this. I know many women. They're feeling a ton of pressure to be everything, professionally, looks-wise, sexually, artistically. They're supposed to be nurturing. They're supposed like do all this
sexy,
stuff.
nurturing, and earn the money, and be at home.
And for many more years than they used to be expected to do it. I mean, have you seen, like, when I look at my age group, my peers at 50 now versus pictures of 50-year-olds in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
50-year-olds in the 70s, they're like ancient. Yeah, and I think that thanks to science and medicine, right? People are living longer. I mean, people are living longer now.
Yeah.
And I think people are maintaining reproductive and sexual health much longer. This is a big deal. I think that people are maintaining their vigor much longer. You also are seeing a lot of people that were married and divorced, had kids, or have second marriages. I mean, none of this was happening when I was younger.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I was one of two kids in my entire high school with divorced parents.
Yeah, I think I was the only one with divorced parents growing up.
It's wild. It's just wild. You know, I think going back to your question of, you know, are men fearful of women? Are they ashamed of themselves? These are the extremes. I think that whatever's happened over the last 10 years, I will say this with certainty, men are sensitized to the fact that they are being watched in a different way now. They're being sized up and assessed. And I don't know, I should ask you, I mean, do women feel like they have a lot more agency and control in life? Like, are they feeling good about where things are at? Let's set aside politics, but in terms of where they're at, do they feel like world's their oyster, they can be stay-at-home mom if they want, world's their oyster, they can be a CEO if they want, world's their oyster, they can be the CEO and have kids, and a couple nannies to help out.
Yeah. Oh, God. All right. So let me tell you about my community and kind of the women around me, because again, going to you is somewhat generalized. I've seen a different change in the dynamic. So I was a stay-at-home wife for 8 years, cooked, cleaned for Tom while he was going to go out and try and make enough money for us to make movies. For 8 years, I didn't say what I wanted. I didn't say that I was unhappy, that I was profoundly miserable. I just told myself every single day, stick it out for the greater good, because that's what a Greek woman does. So that was the message.
That's what a Greek woman does, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Is that, so that's
Greek.
So that's deeply woven in that.
1,000%. So growing up, I was told, wait till you get married. Like, that was going to be the pinnacle of your life. Once you're married and have kids, everything is fine. So when I was a stay-at-home wife for 8 years, the belief system just kept repeating over and over in my head. So I didn't think I had the right to speak up and tell my husband. It got to a point where I was so profoundly unhappy, I pulled him aside and said, I love you more than life itself. but I freaking hate cooking and cleaning for you. Like, it's just not making me happy anymore. And it was once I had said that and broke the silence that Tom turned around and said, what kind of husband would I be if I prioritized clean clothes and food over my wife's happiness? Now, it was a very complex navigation, but I got through it. And then I started it in business and we built $1 billion company. So it was a weird transition. That's a great story to tell. The problem is, over those last 15 years that my life is just what I've just painted, I've seen the pendulum swim the other way, where now women who are stay-at-home wives or stay-at-home mothers are feeling guilty that they're not at work. And it breaks my heart, Andrew. It's like, it is really frustrating that we women cannot accept each other for whatever decisions we make. You want to be a lesbian? Go ham. You want to have 10 kids? Go ham. You want to be in business? Go ham. Like, why can we not just support each other as long as your values and your morals are in line with, you know, obviously treating people good and things like that? We just have the judgment. And I don't know if it's ever going to go away. I don't know if it's just biologically wired within women, just like competition is wired within men somewhat to be the hierarchy. I don't know if it's hardwired into us. And I don't know if we'll ever get past it, or it's just society where you see it swing from one way to the other.
Wow. That's super informative. And I have two reflections, of course, both through the lens of my Y chromosome, which is a distorted lens. We acknowledge that at the outset.
But that's why we had you on.
Okay, appreciate that. One would hope that male or female, somebody would take some time in their teens, 20s, 30s, maybe every 3 to 5 years, and really stop for a morning and ask oneself, like, am I on the right trajectory? Is what I'm investing in here really the way I want to go? I will tell you, on the threshold of my 50th birthday, I wish I had done more of this. And I accomplished. I wanted to be tenured by 40 at Stanford or Harvard. Like, I was super goal oriented. I want a PhD by 30. Like, I was that guy, right? I never thought I'd start a podcast, but like, I just had these milestones, this. And, I thought I was pretty rounded, but there were some things I missed in terms of my personal development. James Hollis is this incredible 84-year-old I think he's 84, more than 80 years old psychoanalyst. I had him on my podcast. He's an incredible mind. And he said, the key to all of this is to take time and go inward, not meditation, could be journaling, but where you really ask yourself, what do I want? What do I really, really want? And I think a lot of people are afraid to really touch into that. If I could remove all social programming, what do I really want? And to do that periodically as a regular practice, once a week, 2 times a week. And he was saying this for men and for women. And then to get back into suit up and show up, as he says, and actually just go do. I don't think we do enough of this. And then we need some sort of internal mentorship among men and women. That's been almost completely lost. Even though my parents split, I feel very grateful. I had my dad on my podcast that, he's 81 years old, still alive, and we're able to talk. I disagree with him on a number of things, and we agree on a number of things. But I'm able to glean mentorship from him, as well as other men growing up. There were these coaches and people. I would look, who's 5 to 10 years older than me that looks like they're doing really well in ways that I would like to do well. I mean, elders are the way this is done.
Oh, yeah.
This is how it's done. We're not supposed to be able to figure it out all by ourselves. And peers, we're all idiots about the future we haven't experienced yet, right? Would none of us have a time machine that includes a crystal ball? We don't know what we're going to want in 5 years. So spending some time thinking about it, I think, is something we just don't do enough of, so we can really be intentional. I'll just pause there and say that there's something else I wanted to share, because we didn't really touch into this, but I'd be remiss if I didn't share it. I hope I'm not ousted from the male community by sharing this, because he's about 5 years older, male friend of mine who has, in my view, a wonderful life. I won't say what that life is, because then people will think that that's like the ideal. But it includes most of the things that people think of when they think of a well-rounded life, career and personally. We were out to dinner. It was me and another guy. Neither of us in relationships at the time. This guy's married. And he said, here's the deal. This is how it works, right? This is how men talk. Right? They're not talking about sex, they're talking this way. He goes, here's the deal. And of course, they're going to draw a graph, right? This is what men do. They plot things out. Among all the women that you could potentially meet, probably, this is his words, he said, 80% of them are not right for you. They're just not. There's something that doesn't make it right for you. We could explore that till the end of time. But 20% are sort of in the domain that we call potential mates. And then within that 20%, there's a continuum of super easygoing, will validate you for, not falsely, but isn't gonna challenge you. They you leave the shoes there, they're cool. You leave the shoes there, they're cool. You cook sometimes, you don't cook, whatever. They're just cool with whatever. They're mellow. Versus super challenging at the other extreme. Always pushing you to be better in every domain of your life. And your job is to figure out where on that continuum you want to be partnered.
Oh,
and I won't tell you where each of us reside, but
good.
what was so incredible is we did this little because we're dudes, write down where we made the little graph and put our little thing on it, and then did a blind test, right? So it was blinded. Me and this other guy had we were on diametrically, I won't reveal which one it was, diametrically
I bet you're
opposite-
the person that wants you to push you to be better.
I'm not going to reveal which one. Diametrically opposite ends of this continuum.
Interesting.
And this also, of course, assumes that the women are doing what they want. They're not pretending to not push, or they're not pushing just to push because they were told it. So, and every guy I've passed this along to is that's a gem. Some guys really like to be pushed. They like someone who's gonna call them on their shit. And I'm not talking about where they're really messing up.
Right.
I'm talking about pushing them, ribbing them, being cynical with them, versus somebody who's just there, they know they're there, and is kind of accepting of them in their current form.
All right, so what's the difference between those two types of guys?
How much they hate themselves. Yeah, how much they self-flagellate in order to progress.
So which ones hate themselves more?
The ones that are pushing themselves harder don't want someone pushing themselves. They're already driving themselves like a slave master. There's an invisible whip on themselves to push harder. And the last thing they want is more you didn't do this right, you need to do that, you need to do more of this. That was good, but the other sushi restaurant would have been better, that kind of thing. The one who is wants to be driven, but can't quite push themselves quite as much. A lot of guys want someone to push them.
That's so interesting.
And some are right in the middle. Keep in mind there's some that are for this and not for that. But I won't reveal where I'm at on that. But I think it was so interesting to me to realize that so much of it is some guys really want someone pushing them, and other guys are I just want someone where I come home. I have a good friend, he's a very happily married, and he just said, work is where I want to feel like I got the shit kicked out of me and I'm still continuing to show up. And home is where I want to come to just completely deflate and relax.
Yeah, I think the most successful entrepreneurs are the people with the most stable home lives, because they can take more risks and know that no matter what, that person's going to be there for them.
Right.
I remember a time Tom burst into tears in front of me, and it was at the pinnacle of Quest. So I think we'd just been announced as $1 billion company, and one day he just started crying. I was like, what's happening? Tom never cried. So I was like, what is happening? And he's like, I get all the accolades. And he's like, and it breaks my heart that no one will ever know not only what you've brought to the business, but how much of a man you've helped me to become.
Love that.
And I mean, he still repeats it to this day. And he was like, you would never just let me fall to my knees. He's like, you pushed me to be better every single day. And you had a certain expectation that when we got married, that I would show up in a certain way. And I was like, yeah, because you said you would. So I just held you to your own word. And he's like, that's the important thing, that I held him to his word, even when it wasn't easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of speaks to this idea that, as much as we as men, this is just a funny phrase, we as men, again, I can only speak from my own experience and observations. As much as we are internally driven, sometimes that pushing of ourselves is its own form of exhaustion. And sometimes it's great to be seen for it. It's also great to be encouraged to come off the gas sometimes. Mm. And also, look, we know we have weaknesses. I mean, that's how we started off this conversation. We know, I've said it for years, I'm replete with flaws. I'm always striving to do better. Every guy I know, even the guy in the basement watching porn, and I do believe that, there's a generative drive in all of us, men and women, and that guy there too, it's been hijacked. I really believe the spirit, we talk about dopamine as the universal currency of motivation and drive, but going a step deeper, we're born with this energy that we come into life with, and we're trying to invest it in things intelligently. Yes, glean pleasure, but not so much pleasure that we eliminate our drive, right? We've seen that. I've seen people drink their drive into the ground. I know many men that did that. I would say a third of my friends from childhood, and I didn't grow up in the inner city and I wasn't in the military, are either dead or in jail or addicts.
Is that more typical for men then?
Probably because of the tendency toward violence. You know, I mean, we talk about the higher suicide rates, successful suicides, because men tend to use more violent means. I would say about a third are doing pretty well. And I've been very fortunate that about a third of my friends are like on this cosmic trajectory where they're doing incredible things in the world. Some of whom I've met since I became a podcaster, but many of whom, like a good friend of mine from childhood, just got elected to the National Academy of Sciences. And that the James Hollis thing of reflecting on where do I want to invest this is so key. But I do think that there are technologies like pornography, it's weird to call it technology, but there are drugs, sedatives, especially, that they hijack that drive. And they ruin lives because they hijack our intrinsic energy, our drive, which is really all we have. And I think in relationship, we were talking a little bit about this earlier, the biggest fear for men and for women, presumably, is that we're gonna invest in the wrong place. Our energies are gonna be put in the wrong place, and time will pass and we will be left stranded. And so the whole business of dating and finding partnership and all this stuff, it's a giant mental math, like emotional, spiritual math that's very hard. And we can't control other people. So you can see why there'd be a lot of anxiety around it. But hopefully, thankfully, the discussions like the ones that you're holding are gonna help people kind of step back and reflect a bit.
Honestly, that's the goal. Is a lot of people in my life, in my community, have just given up on love, and they've had really bad experiences.
Really?
Yeah, because they've had really bad experiences with men. So I've done a lot of episodes on psychopaths and serial killers and things like that, which is why I know so much about it. But like when I go to my community, people are like, that happened to me. I got stalked. I got trapped. Had a woman literally coming up to me, Andrew, in the middle of the street. She burst into tears, and she said, I was married and I had 4 kids, and he was a complete narcissist. He would scream and shout at us, and we were never allowed to dance or sing. And if we danced or sung in the house because we were happy, he would threaten to harm our children. Oh. So he would say to the mother, if you do this, like, I'm gonna hurt the children. She came up to me, she said, and then I found one of your videos, Lisa, and I realized that that wasn't a death sentence and that I could change my life. And so skip forward, she ended up getting an apartment. She took her 4 kids into this 1-bedroom apartment. And she said, you know what the first thing we did is? We sung and we danced. And when you've heard stories like that, where women have had such horrific experiences with men, you can understand why they're just like, it's fearful. They took my house. I had no money. I do think this is sometimes why people go over to OnlyFans. So it's like, I can't blanket statement that OnlyFans is bad, because
you mean as
monetization?
Oh, I see. From not as a spectator, but
as a way to get money, because one of the biggest fears is you don't have the financial freedom, so you can't leave. Okay, so now painting the picture of my community where they've had the most horrific stuff done to them, you can understand why it's very dangerous to trust someone. It breaks my heart though, because the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I built businesses, I've had a pretty, fun life, is my husband. And when that's the most amazing, precious thing in my life is my marriage. And so it breaks my heart that people are giving up on love. It breaks my heart that men are no longer having sex and never trying to approach a woman because they're scared, and women are cruel to them. That isn't good either. So when I look at the world and I just said, no bullshit, how do we actually help the younger or even our generation find beautiful relationships? I think it's this.
And I think it's kind of scary to think that people are really diverging like this. You know, I've talked about this once before, but like I've always, for whatever reason, I've always had a couple friends who are lesbians, like, and I do now. And like, they're great because they have great optics on women, like great optics on
They know everyone, yeah.
Oh, I always say, listen, when it comes to men, I can spot a sociopath. I know them because I've known them. Oh, I can spot a sociopath, easy. I can tell walking down, I was on the Venice Boardwalk yesterday walking, I could see if somebody from a distance, just a silhouette, like he's cool, like he's kind of unhinged. He's unhinged if he's gonna cruise right by, or he's super sketchy. I can sense, it's just like a...
Oh, give me a couple of things, quickly. What are you sensing?
Oh, I mean, this is more of an innate sense.
Yeah.
Like you can hear someone screaming and kind of, he's in a sadly, a mentally ill moment, versus somebody else who's about to be aggressive. This is just something that comes with experience and you just kind of tune to. But when it comes to spotting good versus bad, as someone once described to me, sacred feminine versus profane feminine, like I have the optics of a monkey blindfolded on LSD. Like, I really do. So I've had to,
I'm just visualizing it.
Yeah. So I've had to, and listen, I've had some wonderful relationships, and I still have great friendships with some of those relationships, and I have great female friends, but like nobody has optics on women like lesbians, because they specialize in women, right? And they, the ones I know, like, they're also fond of men as a theme, as half our species. I mean, I'm only being somewhat facetious. Like, they've been a wonderful source, like a very rich source of information about, like, nah, that's BS. Like, that's not your responsibility, Andrew, to have to deal with that. Like, that's her work. Or, Andrew, like, come on, dude. Like, that's how they talk, right? One of them anyway, that I know. Like, dude, like, come on. Like, this is on you. This is on them. And I think that, I'm beginning to think that, like, lesbians might save the world. Because they have such clear, uncontaminated optics, because they have no agenda about a romantic relationship with you if you're male.
That's
right?
true. But lesbians do have the worst divorce rate. I literally just heard
I was shocked to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, the ones I know are still together.
So, okay, well, that's good. But you've got lesbians, heterosexuals, and then gay men. So lesbians are the highest rate of divorce. It's like 72% versus heterosexuals, which is what, like, I think it's 52% or something like that.
And going up.
Yeah. And then gays, I think gay men are like around the 20%, something like that. But I love that you have, if I can break it down what you just said from the outside, I want this thing. I know that just like anything, I got to get better at it. It's like a skill. I'm going to have a mentor that knows exactly, that's way better than me, that understands it, and they're going to guide me. And it happens to be a lesbian couple that now really can be honest with you. I love that so much. All right, I got another one for you. So when it comes to what's a man really thinking when it comes to marriage, when I think about the different men that I've at least met, you've got the men that were just fearful. Like, the commitment idea is just scary. It's like handcuffs. They just run from commitment. And then you've got the other people, men that really do want to find a woman, build a family. I've heard you say how much you want kids. Obviously, it has to be with the right woman. So what's the difference between the man that is like, this is what I want, beautiful, nurturing, and oh my God, I'm never going to go through or near it with the 10-foot pole?
All right. Well, this is so weird, because I know men who, from the time they were like in their 20s, they're like, marriage all the way.
Oh.
Some of them have parents that are divorced. Even high conflict divorces, some of them have parents that are together. It just doesn't, the math isn't 1-to-1. And they're still happily married. And it's interesting for me to sit back and reflect that, like, 99% of my friends are happily married, most with kids, most first marriages with kids. Because, when you say happily married, you go, like, what, fifth marriage?
Yeah.
Some with kids, some without. I also know people that, for whatever reason, just can't seem to get it right in marriage, and they're like on their third or fourth thing. And hopefully this time, like, we all pray for them, like, and you never know, is it him, was it her, was it state of, age? So I think it differs. I mean, I know the greatest growth in my life came from big commitments, like going and getting a PhD at a time when everyone was making a lot of money in the .com thing. I mean, do you know what I made as a PhD student? I made $17,000 a year. I was happy as a clam. I was so happy because I was doing experiments. I could afford to, I'd save up, go snowboarding a little bit. I still had a student ID, even though I was older than all the other people. And I could, like, get stuff with my, a ski pass or snowboarding. I was so happy. That changed over time. Fortunately, the income and what I wanted. But, I think that people hit their desire for partnership and marriage at different rates. I personally have this theory that a lot of it has to do with our own internal perception of how long we're going to live. Every one of my friends who lost a parent relatively young got married and had kids young.
Oh, because they think they're going to die early.
Definitely.
Like their parents, you're right.
You're like, friends, in this case, it was almost always the fathers of male friends of mine who died. They were like looking for their wife in college. They're like, I want to, in their 20s. And fortunately, they're still married now. So their sense of like how long life lasts was very different than mine. My perception of how long I was going to live was only really like about a year ago that I was like, oh yeah, like I actually might die. And I, of course, know this, I'm a biologist.
Sure,
but I just kind of assumed I would live a very long time. I may not. Steve Jobs, if you listen to his biography by Walter Isaacson, he had a very keen sense of time and the passage of time. He was like on an urgency streak. He also said, wait till you find the right person. There's nothing better. Don't rush it. Don't settle. But I think, there are biological constraints, in particular for women, right? If we're honest, right? The window for fertility closes earlier, typically. We are learning, however, that with proper care, that window on fertility can be quite longer than we initially thought. And that there are also some things that fortunately people are talking about now to kind of be mindful of in terms of hormone health early on that could help avoid some of the early closure that previous generations of women experienced. So I think a lot of it has to do, here, I'll be more direct.
Yes.
If a woman is really interested in if a guy is serious about marriage, I think you should just ask him. Like, do you want to get married at some point in the next 5 years? Do you see yourself married with kids by a certain age? If they haven't thought about it, chances are that that's a no. I'm not gonna speak for all men, but if they're like, yeah, I would, if with the right person, yes, that's a partial answer, by the way.
It feels like sometimes there's a bit of a cop-out.
It's not an answer.
Yeah.
It's a non-answer. In science, we'd be like, that's not an answer. That's not an answer. That's not an answer. That's saying, if we're asking about, of course, with the right person.
Yeah,
right?
You're
of
not
course
asking
with the right
the wrong person,
right?
You're so true.
Of course with the right. It's like saying, if you had a gun to your head, what would you do? And you'd be like, is it a squirt gun? It's like, no, it's a gun with a bullet, you idiot. It's very different. Yeah, so that's kind of like a contortion type answer. It's like, and sometimes I can say this from experience, sometimes we don't know. And that's where the James Hollis, I keep citing him because he was really the one, the importance of men and women going inside, removing all the outside influences. You can do this anywhere. It costs nothing, but it's hard. And going what do I really want? What do I really, really want? And what am I willing to do to get it? And what am I unwilling to do to get it? And then you see the mismatch between where you're at and that thing. So, because as men, I think we're really good at distracting ourselves when we can't get our head around what is we want, when it feels kind of overwhelming. There are just so many other places to place our energy, and they're not all destructive. It's I'll tell you right now, if I was forced to have that conversation with myself, when I was 28 or 30, I would have just been I'm going to lab. I'm going to work.
Yeah.
Because there I'm going to get papers. I'm going to we kind of default to what would happen if I threw this rock against the wall 100th time? But I think the more that, so maybe the better question, I'm exploring here a little bit, forgive me, but maybe the better question isn't, do you want marriage and family? But how much have you thought about your answer? Not as you sure you don't want to change your answer? Because that doesn't feel good. But on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you are absolutely certain. And 1 being if the right person came along. That's such a dumb answer. So silly. If I got tricked into it. I mean, it's so dumb, right? It's not an answer. It's a non-answer. Then I think you'd get a much clearer optics. And it doesn't mean it's a deal breaker, right? You could just all right, well, maybe you should think about that a little more, dude. Because I'm thinking about that. And anytime I answer a question, by the way, from the woman's perspective of what she do, here, you know what I'm doing in my head? I'm thinking about, what would I want someone to done with my best female friend or with my sister? My sister's been married, has kids, and the whole thing. But what would I want for them, right? Because it's very hard when you're in your own first person because you get defended.
Yeah, that's so true.
So I think that's how certain are you? It's like a game show. What's your answer? How certain are you of your answer?
I love that about how much have you thought about it, because it kind of takes the pressure off of do you want to get married, yes or no? It's how much have you thought about it? That's a beautiful way of doing it. Going to the thing about emotion, that was another one that I actually had. So what's a man really thinking when it comes to crying and being vulnerable? How much of men is that you guys are protecting yourselves from shame, from people's opinion? Or is it from a old belief that you guys have been taught from very young that boys don't cry?
Well, full confession, I got my mom's emotionality at the level of kind of I feel things very intensely. I've cried on podcasts, my own and others. So those moments didn't feel great, to be honest. They kind of, I'm I'm okay with the fact that it happened. I'm not disparaging of men crying at all. I will tell, this one actually can be a brief answer. The extent to which a man is okay with crying or having cried in front of other people will scale directly with how successful he is in other areas of life. Being an NHL hockey player crying in a press conference, very different than a guy crying not at an NHL, being someone who, it's clear he's a successful person. It's clear he has many masculine traits and then cries. It's like an add-on. People nowadays, that thankfully, I think, they get credit of like, wow, like that took guts. That took guts. But if it's just a lot of emotionality without any demonstration, forgive the word, but any demonstration of having been able to do hard things where you have to buckle down and show up and put your needs and emotions to the side and show up and get things done, well, that's a different picture.
But why do men try to fix things, then go into being vulnerable and talking through things, versus a woman who, let's be very honest, when, at least in my relationship, with something, when shit hits the fan with me, I'm like, babe, I need to talk through it. I need cuddles. I just need you to give me space, to hold space for me. But many times, and my friends and everyone I speak to, it's so typical that the woman wants to talk through her emotions, feel the vulnerability, and the man just doesn't want to sit with his vulnerability, doesn't want to sit with those emotions.
And sometimes doesn't want to sit with hers either.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. I think there are certain categories of emotions that men find very difficult to feel because they feel so darn inconvenient and counter I don't mean just work productivity, but they feel either like a waste of time or a distraction, and that they impede our judgment. Men love when their partners are happy. They love it, and they hate when their partners are unhappy. They don't like it, especially if it was because of something they did or didn't do, right? I mean, we're human in that way, fortunately, right? I think we're talking about difficult emotions. I think sadness, anger, frustration, confusion, shame, these kinds of things, as opposed to like all the positive emotions, right?
Do you think though anger is as hard for a man than shame?
Depends on, nowadays it's tricky because, you have your, used to be called passion. Oh. Right? A guy losing his cool, like going unhinged, is kind of the end of his professional career. It's really interesting, on X, there've been a few interactions, some of which I've been involved in, where, fortunately I wasn't on the like collapse part of this, but occasionally a guy who appears to have all his stuff together will react to a comment and everyone's like, he cracked. He cracked. Right? He claims to like never react, it never gets under his skin, he cracked. X is a place where men are testing other men, and women are testing men too. I don't know about women, I'm not watching those dynamics. Again, monkey, blindfolded, LSD. So this notion that you don't let your emotions get so big that you like reveal a lack of capacity to hold, you call it holding space, right? It's very interesting, right? Like we want men to be able to express and to feel, but not so much that they break things.
Yes.
Not so much that they break the moment, right? And I'm sure as women are hearing this, there's gonna be a percentage of them going, oh, well, now you get a sense of what it's like to be a woman in the world every single day. It's like, listen, I got lesbian friends, I got a sister, I got friends, I got female friends, I know it, like,
We remind you all the time.
Yeah, sure, I get it. There's always a mirror to this, right?
Of course.
But since you're asking about that, I think some of the best work that I've been exposed to in the last couple of years is deep work, guided work, that really lets you like feel things really big, really terrible emotions, and going over that hump and crashing into like a puddle of my own, like just, and realizing nothing got broken, no one was harmed. I don't just feel okay, I feel 10 times better. This ability to purge these big emotions in safe ways, safe to us and safe to others. I'm fascinated by some of the traditions of forgive me, I don't know the politically correct language, but like the Native American, I think that's politically,
I'm from England, I'm the worst person.
I'll tell you why I don't want to offend anyone.
Yeah.
It's not so that I don't get comments, it's that like the language is changing so fast.
I know.
And like, and I've been exposed recently to some people in the tribes communities who talk about, men bringing younger men in early on and teaching them how to do like, forget sauna, they sweat. They know how to put them into like dangerously uncomfortable heat. Don't do this on your own, folks. And sometimes, yes, it's purging, there's vomiting involved. And you're like, wait, what is this? This would be considered abuse, right? But they return from this feeling cleansed and ready to show up their best selves. Okay, so there's no, and there's safeguards. And so like, I feel like the more we move away from that, the more it becomes self-destruction, inward destruction, guys harming themselves with alcohol, porn, opioids. So I think that, big emotions need a place to go safely. And I think that it's kind of counterintuitive because we don't want to feed big emotions and let them get out of control. But I think that purge and catharsis is really required. And this is one of the beauties, I think, of like martial arts, why some people like they channel it into jiu-jitsu or they channel it into running, ultra running or something like that. But not everyone has time to run a marathon a day, and not everyone has time to roll jiu-jitsu for 2 hours a day. We need healthy places to put our feelings. And I think that men guiding men on how to do that is something I'm very interested in. And that's why I'm learning about it now.
And what would be really interesting, by the way, is if there's a way to also help women, and maybe it's not you and it's a counterpart or something, but when I was thinking about what you were just saying, it's amazing to help men think through processing your emotions, tears, vulnerability. But there is this other part of helping women receive it. Because I remember the first time I saw Tom cry, I just froze. I froze because I'd never seen my dad cry before. He was a very masculine Greek man. And so growing up, it was like, men don't cry. And that was what I saw and heard and was taught. So you can imagine now I get into this relationship with Tom, and the first time he cries, I don't freaking know how to handle it. So I go just blanket stare at him. Now, how do you think that made him feel? So as I'm thinking about you helping men navigate it, I think it would be really beautiful if we can help women understand how to receive a man who is being vulnerable.
Yeah, love the question. And I grew up in my dad's Argentine traditional family. I saw some emotion, but it was more like excitement and love, but like I mean, I always say, and I say this with such fun, my dad's hugs are like, they're like, I'm like, dude, he's like he hugs, like means it. Like he loves you that much and he puts it into his physicality. And he's Latin, so I think for an American kid, that actually felt like a lot. When I was growing up, you didn't have dads telling their sons they love them. Now you do. My dad was like, Argentines are very expressive.
They're like the Greeks, yeah.
They're very expressive. My first girlfriend, her dad was Greek, very Greek. And yeah, I was terrified of him. And he made me terrified of him.
Oh yeah, of course.
Eventually they let me in.
Of course.
So just, wonderful culture. Here's my advice. Again, just my experience, my observation. It's amazing and wonderful when a woman, our partner, or a female friend can hold space and let us be sad, and then don't remind us that it happened later. Because the fear isn't that like in the moment she's gonna be like, you wuss, or like, what is this?
Right.
It's gonna be that later you're gonna be reminded of it or told you should do it again. Like, hey, I can tell you're really upset. Like, let's just agree that happened. And let's agree we're not going to talk about it again.
So you don't want to be like, let's say the next day, like, look, you were really sad yesterday.
Totally.
Is there anything I can do? You just literally want us to forget it.
Yeah. I mean, I could see, I'm talking from experience. I've had like hey, I really appreciate that you were able to share that. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Can we talk about something else?
Yeah.
Because it's like, thank you. Like it exists in that moment. And I think that's how men want, again, every time I say men, blah, 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 put in the disclaimer. But I think that's how we want our harder emotions to be held, as like our sadness is that happened, you moved through it, there's no reason to talk about it again. Like not now. I think the permission to do more of that comes from not making it like this big, like now everything is different. Because nothing's different, except that now he feels safe to do that and knows he can do it. Whereas I think like we never want to, because we don't think of it as our worst moments, but it's not really what we want to be remembered for. Like if you think about like eulogies and like you're like, and he was so awesome because like I remember this time when he was really hurt and came to me and cried. Every guy in his grave is like down there. There's like, no, tell about the time I ran in front of a truck and grabbed I mean, we're, just like, I'm trying to think of the inverse for women.
What's interesting though, in the same example with the vulnerability, women want you to ask again. So it's like the opposite of guys. So you don't want to be reminded. As a woman, it's like, you think that 24 hours just healed me? So I remember.
Yeah, well, that's the Y chromosome. Forward, always forward. Forward, always forward. We don't like thinking about the past. We're like in the present and we're thinking about the future. Oh. And there's always, well, he doesn't want to plan a future. That's a different picture. Like we are like in our best. We're here now to make the best of now. One of the best phrases I ever learned was from my female graduate advisor when she used to just say, my time machine is broken. Like if something came up about like, we should have done that, she goes, well, that's funny. She was an awesome lady. She's passed, but she's just the awesomest lady. And she just go, well, my time machine is broken. Or I'd ask a question about the future and she'd go, hold on, let me look into my crystal ball. I'm like, all right, got it. Eventually I learned to stop asking. Yeah. Like just learning to be like as present as possible to what's happening and then letting that drift into the past. Now sometimes things need to be discussed, like, hey, last week, this thing. But like, if you've ever tried that with a guy, it's like, really? Like that was like a week ago. Oh, yeah. Like that was like a lifetime ago. I think I'm getting to this place now in this conversation where I'm beginning to think that the men and women parse time differently. Oh. Like literally the passage of time and like where their optics are, like right here. And I think there are good evolutionary reasons for that. And at the extreme stereotypes, they're more apparent. And toward the middle, they're less apparent. Because men are damn good at building things for the long arc. Damn good, as are women. But we generally don't think a whole lot about the past. We don't like to think about the past. I sure as hell know I don't. I have like these pictures from the past. I occasionally look at them and I was just like, I'm gonna put this away for another time. Like, why would I want to think about that? Like today's today and I want to go forward.
When something happens to me, it just takes me time for the chemicals to change my body, for me to get my mindset in the right space and move on. And because Tom isn't like that, when something happens and then the next day, if I wake up and I'm still sad, he'll go, what's wrong? I feel so judged, Andrew. So it feels like dismissiveness, but now understanding what you're saying about, look, men look into the future, understand it's not everybody, but men generally do. Now at least I understand that the next time Tom may accidentally dismiss my emotions for something I felt yesterday, I don't take it as personal. I just like, that's how he sees things.
Yeah, and I think for the last, decade or so, the conversation has really been around like, a revision of a lot of the traditional male stereotypes. I mean, I grew up in a completely different landscape. Yeah. And the TV shows tell the story. Yeah. There was a TV show that came out when I was a kid, All in the Family, about a mom going to work. My mom went to work after having been a stay-at-home mom, and it was like a thing. Now, so things have really changed. And I think that what you just said, I want to make sure I don't blow past it, because I think if it's the case that women hold a kind of larger time bin of events and like emotional understanding of themselves and what happened yesterday, let's just assume that like, let's make up a scientist. Let's arbitrarily say you wake up in the morning holding knowledge and sense of what happened over the last, emotionally and practically over the last 4 days. And you're thinking about today and the next day. And let's say Tom is really taking same units of energy and putting it to like today and tomorrow. Like understanding that, just that shift in perspective, that like being able to say like, I'm gonna like expand my time horizon backward and forward a little bit. And maybe yours is like, I'm gonna maybe take turns, like shrink, I'm not trying to be a therapist here, but shrink your time horizon. I mean, it was really hard for me to see big emotionality in somebody that I was partnered with for a long time. Fortunately, still really close friends. I'll tell you, that was like, I get a little emotional. I'm not gonna get emotional.
Which you're welcome to here.
Thank you. I'll try not to cry.
We receive it.
Because like the amount of work that we did therapy together and we did like the amount of work that went into that. And recently, actually, we had a little bit of a sticky interaction. We're still friends and we were discussing a practical thing. And she said something and then I like heard her, but then I said something about how, and like, it was clear like I had failed it. And then we were just like, we're gonna take a break. There was a call back, we got on the phone and we patched it up and we were both like 10 out of 10 recovery. Aww. But only because there's just these moments where you realize like, we're never gonna get the other's perspective. We're just never gonna get the other's perspective. And I think, but that was someone I was with for 7 years. 7 years is a long time. And made a hell of a lot of mistakes, me more than her, but got some things right too. I think I don't hold on to the past much. anymore. I think I had to learn how to do that. But I think that in general, I never really liked the past. It was like an inconvenience. And so maybe that's one of the fundamental differences. So maybe we just need some like tweaking of the time dimensionality.
Yeah. Or like just at least understanding where each other's coming from. So when you speak and you communicate, there's no judgment and shame. And I think that happens quite a lot, where it's like if you don't understand where the other person's coming from and you can't quite get on the same page, they just seem crazy to you. And I'm really working hard, Andrew, really working hard to stop judging guys. And again, like, look, there are some nefarious people out there, 1,000%. But when we make these labels, like I was with a couple a few days ago, broke my heart. She just called him stupid in front of everyone. And it broke my heart. And I was like, either you're being disrespectful, which I don't think she meant to be. It's like, it's just the language they use. And when I think about what that looks like in 5 and 10 years and 20 years, when you're in a relationship and you're having these words and this communication and you don't realize what's happening.
Yeah, that I'll tell you right now, from a male perspective, that relationship's over. Even if they stay alive till the end of time. I mean, the Secret Life of Walter Mitty is a book about a guy having fantasies all day long while his wife, not about sexual fantasy, just fantasies of him actually being an important person in the world, doing interesting things while his wife is talking to him about this and that and shopping for whatever, because he completely checked out because of the ridicule. I mean, I realize it does go in both directions. I mean, people use words as weapons. And one thing that's happened in the last number of years is that words like narcissist, sociopath, even psychopath, they've lost their potency because everyone's calling everyone anything.
Yeah.
Nobody's clinically, most people aren't clinically trained to do this. And as a consequence, likewise with trauma, right? I think it was an important shift in the late 90s, early 2000s when we realized that there's this notion of micro traumas. But I think that it's important to distinguish between being hurt and being injured, right? So physically, it's very important. If you do things physically, you have to be like, that really hurts. But are you injured? The moment you say you're injured, you're in a different category. It needs a kind of repair that means stopping, maybe changing sports for a while or doing something different. I think that psychologically, it's all in the eye and the heart of the beholder, right? Like, so people will say like, that feels traumatizing or that hurts. And so the languages have become very mishmashy. You said something earlier, which it just felt so important, which is, I think if we can just make the shift from slightly less judgment and replace that with even slightly more effort to understand, we're going to get really far. I mean, this goes for men and it goes for women. Like, the question is like, how much of our hurt are we responsible for repairing on our own? And I'm not, the person to answer that question. I think that there are excellent therapists. I'm seeing some new accounts on Instagram and people were like really thinking about this. Like, how much accountability do we have to ourselves to handle our stuff? And this is why I've become a fan of, I started reading up on, what are the sort of tried and true methods for safely purging anger, hurt, shame for men in ways that don't harm themselves or anyone else. Like, it's a simple question, right? But like, what are those? Like, what are the categories? Are you supposed to scream? You're supposed to take up boxing? Well, boxing, you get hit in the head, you get a concussion, probably a bad idea. Screaming, you blow out your vocal cords, okay, maybe.
Who was the entrepreneur that would go out and scream in the woods?
Steve Jobs. Yeah. I grew up in his area. And so we'd see him, he'd literally walk around barefooted around downtown Palo Alto in that area. And I never saw him screaming or anything. He was known for having quite a temper, And I think depending on how anger was handled in homes, like I grew up in a home where emotionality was handled very differently by one parent than the other, Nowadays, there's so much more understood, but I think having ways to safely purge, and not as a way to amplify our pain, but as a way to dispel our pain for us, right? For us as individuals. So key. And even if there still needs to be discussion and notions of accountability, sure, but all of that can be had in a much more like effective way, I think, if we're handling the part that's ours. This whole my part of the street, your part of the street. So I think about this a lot. And I think the masculine-feminine dynamic and what one is responsible for and what others are responsible for is like the issue. Like the issue.
Andrew Huberman, dude, this was so amazing. Like, honestly, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, we've known each other for a long time. First time on Women of Impact. I really hope that by the end of this, people leave really feeling more compassion for each other. I think having more understanding for each other. And I'm really curious on how you expel your anger and shame leads. So please do fill us in. If people want to follow that journey, in fact, where can people go to follow you?
Yeah, so we're Huberman Lab on all platforms. We have a website with links to all the podcasts, and on Instagram, Huberman Lab, X, Instagram, YouTube. It's all Huberman Lab. I'll probably start talking more about this stuff in the months and years to come. I want to say I'm so grateful for this conversation. We didn't end up talking about what I thought we were going to talk about. It turned out to be far more interesting to me, and I didn't anticipate any of it. And I think what was so much fun for me is I learned. Like a lot of what we got to here is because of learning from you and from Tom. You guys are such a beautiful example of like taking your lives and doing your best and then sharing it with people. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, again, I don't claim to be the authority on these things. I have flaws like everybody else. I'm trying to figure it out like everybody else. And but I really applaud that you're so interested in bringing on different viewpoints and opinions. Like your desire and intention to bring about, let's call it what it is, like healing between men and women is undeniable, and it's really a wonderful thing to see, let alone be a part of. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, like I said, I've known this man for a long time. I've been dying to have him on this show for a long time, and now is the right time to talk about the difference between men and women so that we can, like he said, I didn't expect the word heal, but that is a beautiful word right now, so that we can start to heal each other. You can choose the channels, the YouTube channels that just show hate and aggression, and that is absolutely your prerogative. But the reason why you come to Women of Impact so that you can actually build your confidence. You can build your confidence in any area, and today, hopefully you've built your confidence in relationships so that you can be more compassionate and show your partner more love and respect, and just create a safe place for them to be. So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you're not subscribed, smash that subscribe button down there. And until next time, be the hero of your own life. Peace.
That was a lot of fun.
If you want to better understand how men actually really think, then you've got to watch this episode with one of the all-time greats, Dr. Amen. Now, you've scanned over 250,000 brains and have concluded that yes, men and women's brains are different, and it can actually show up in subtle ways.